I'm never going to tell you to not be excited about a Chicago Bears free agent signing, but handing a big contract to a free agent running back isn't the best use of the Chicago Bears resources.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms at Locked On Bears, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On the show today, we look at the Chicago Bears signing of DeAndre Swift, who's certainly a good football player, but not the best uses of the Chicago Bears' salary cap space and resources, given where this team stands right now. That being said, I also think we shouldn't overreact in either direction here to what was just one day of not even free agent signings, but just free agent negotiating, and that a long free agency is still ahead of us here. We need to make sure that we're not prejudging Ryan Poles here for this offseason before we even get a chance to see what he does beyond just, I guess now Kevin Byard, Jalen Johnson's contract, and DeAndre Swift coming in from the outside. And I also want to take a look at how the free agent market is playing out right now with some of the top pass rushers off the market, a bunch of centers off the market, still some good options at some of those spots, including receiver and the kind of the middle class of the pass rushers as well, and kind of preview what could still be ahead as free agency moves fast and furious. But it started swift for the Chicago Bears with the running back from the Philadelphia Eagles, DeAndre Swift, coming over on a 3-year deal worth $24 million. Essentially, a 3-year deal, worth $24 million. Essentially like an $8 million a year contract there. The way the numbers end up splicing out, it's a little bit backloaded, so it's more like 6 and then 9 and then 9 as if you sort of do some rough math in there, but that's kind of how it ends up ultimately kind of playing out for the Bears. They keep the year one cap hit down, and it's more of like a 2-year deal with that third year as a team option, because the 15.8, or I guess the $14 million fully guaranteed in the contract essentially makes the first 2 years of this contract are pretty much fully guaranteed, and then the last year is not guaranteed. So the Bears could cut him after 2 seasons and get out of the deal. So for a 25-year-old running back, you feel like you're pretty secure here, right? He's not going to completely fall off the map in 2 seasons, and that he's still an explosive player, a player who's certainly an upgrade for the Chicago Bears backfield, right? No one is here to say DeAndre Swift is not a good player, is not someone who makes the Chicago Bears better with him than they would be without him. But what it comes down to is about the use of the team's resources, and whether handing this running back, or perhaps almost any running back, a 3-year, $24 million contract with $14 million guaranteed is, whether or not it is the best choice for the Chicago Bears and for any team as they try and build out the roster. When the Swift deal first came out, I think the initial reaction was a decent amount of like, whoa, that's a lot of money for DeAndre Swift. And as the first day of free agent negotiating played out, we saw the running back market prove to be more robust than I think many people anticipated. The same thing was true for the linebacker spot. And the feeling is that perhaps that's a reflection of how teams feel about the upcoming NFL draft class, where it's not a super strong group at running back or linebacker, so maybe teams more inclined to pay at those spots. But as some of the other running back deals were handed out, the 3 years, 24 for DeAndre Swift seemed like a more appropriate deal, and not like Ryan Poles getting there too early and overspending when Tony Pollard gets essentially the same base deal of 3 years, $24 million from the Tennessee Titans. Josh Jacobs gets $12 million a year from the Green Bay Packers. Saquon Barkley gets about $12 million a year from the Philadelphia Eagles. And, Austin Eckler ends up moving around a little bit. Like, you see guys get signed to these contracts, and it's not like Swift was a massive overpay comparatively. But that doesn't mean it was still a great use of resources. I mean, Swift, to me, he's an explosive, dynamic runner. He's got a lot of tread on the tires. He will make this Bears offense better. He shows some juice as a receiver out of the backfield, although the production there has been up and down. And I do think if you look back over his tape with the Eagles this season, he lost out on quite a few touchdowns because of the tush push. Like, he could have had a handful more if you're just looking at his base stats. But he's never been a great pass blocker. But okay, that's not a reason not to sign a running back. Again, like, he makes the Bears backfield better. But does he make them $8 million better? How much better is this Bears offense with DeAndre Swift than it would be with Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson and everyone else? Like, with Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson, the Bears had a fine backfield. Not as dynamic, perhaps, as DeAndre Swift can add to it, but does adding a slightly better running back make this Bears running game so much better that it helps you win more football games? Like, does DeAndre Swift add to the number of football games you win this season compared to what you might have had with Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson? Maybe he does. But the bigger argument here is not just, does Swift make you better, but does Swift make you as good as the amount of money you could have used on his contract towards adding other players at other positions? We talked about this on yesterday's podcast with the rumors of interest in Saquon Barkley. That sure fell apart quickly with Swift in the fold, I think within the first hour of the free agent negotiating window opening. But regardless, it's like, okay, you could spend that $8 million on Swift, and that might make your team this much better, whatever percentage you think that is, whatever amount better you think that is. But could that $8 million a year go toward a number 2 or number 3 wide receiver? That I would think, given where the holes are in this Bears roster, spending more money at wide receiver makes your team even more improved than the improvement you get by adding Swift to a backfield that's already pretty good. Like, right? You have a receiving core that is DJ Moore and not much else, and you need more at receiver. And if you'd use that money at that spot, you're filling a weakness, as opposed to with Swift, you're adding on top of a position that is already, if not a strength, already settled, already set. You could get by and feel comfortable and productive with what the Bears already had at running back. So Swift becomes more of a luxury addition at a position that's not necessarily a need. And you know what? If you're still able to fill everything else and build out your roster at the end of the day, then Swift's no big deal. And really, at the end of the day, the Bears have the cap space to where it's not going to drastically hurt them. This is not a deal where if things don't work out with Swift, it's not going to cripple the franchise for years and years. So I'm not here to rain on the whole parade and say, you should not like DeAndre Swift. You should not like this move. No. Root for Swift, buy his jersey. He's going to be fun to watch on Sundays. Like, absolutely, it's going to be fun. But, like, it doesn't feel like a great process. Like, the not ideal way of spending money at a position where you consistently see great players coming out of the draft every year. You draft cheap rookies. You can keep that position cheaper and spend more money at other positions that are harder to fill, that you can't just find 5th and 6th round picks every year that end up being some of the leading rushers in the NFL. Look at Kyron Williams in Los Angeles for a 6th round pick. I think he was in the 6th round. That had more rushing yards this season than DeAndre Swift. Like, they're always available in the draft. You can always find cheap running backs. So spending big on a running back doesn't typically work super well for those teams that do it, even though we're seeing the Packers and the Titans and the Eagles and some other teams who have had success go out and do it as well. I'm still not sold that it's a great idea at this stage in the process, but we got to see how the rest of free agency plays out for the Bears. That's the other big takeaway from day one of the negotiating period. It's like, everybody needs to slow down. We do this every single year. The Bears sign somebody, the Bears don't sign. We watch all these other players sign with other teams, and people say, what is Ryan Poles doing? He's blowing it. He's ruining free agency. Fire the GM. We got to go through the patience process here and why we're still really, really early in free agency, and that a lot of moves are still coming down the pipeline. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the college basketball tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So you bet $5 on anything, and if your bet is correct, not only do you get those winnings for those $5, but then you get an extra $200 in bonus bets added into your account that you can use on point spreads, money lines. You can pick who's going to win it all. You can bet on the upcoming NFL Draft the NFL Draft 2, all on app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. FanDuel, official sports partner of the NFL. One day of free agency negotiating, not even actual free agency, is in the books. And you already feel this impatience and overreaction and just general like uneasiness from a lot of Chicago Bears fans out there that, oh man, you look around the board, all these other great players that I wanted the Bears to sign are off the board. What is Ryan Poles doing? Why is he sitting on his hands? Why won't the Bears go out and spend and get these free agents? The world is ending. And it literally only took like 4 hours for this to happen. I mean, I started noticing it right away on social media. I want to say it was like, 3 o'clock, because the window opened in like 11 a.m. Central Time, right? And I think it was about 3 o'clock Central Time that I got my first tweet of like, Ryan Poles is a joke. I wish we were doing what the Packers were doing, signing all these players. It was at 3:06 p.m. on Twitter. And certainly, like, I don't want to take Twitter trolls or meatballs as like the true temperature of the fan base or whatever, but like this also happened last year, and it's a trend that I want to make sure that we like make sure we're all on the same page about here. It's like, yes, a bunch of players that you want the Bears to sign are going to sign with other teams. And Ryan Poles has shown us, at least through the first couple of off seasons here, that he's not going to throw his standards away to be the highest bidder on a guy that he feels like he just absolutely has to have no matter what. He'll negotiate with guys and he'll see how high the price tag might go. And if he can reach an agreement with a player like DeAndre Swift that's in his price range that he feels like is a good value for his team and for that player, then they're going to strike a deal. But if that player prices himself out of the Bears' range, then he's not going to overspend just to get the guy that he feels like he, just absolutely has to have that guy, because there are always other options available in free agency. So as we sit and watch, I guess didn't hit the open market, but Chris Jones re-signs with the Kansas City Chiefs. Christian Wilkins on that first day of free agency. A lot of Bears fans want to see him come, ends up with the Raiders. And all these other guys jumping around, some of the edge rushers coming off the board. Brian Burns traded from the Panthers to who traded for Brian Burns? Now I'm totally, it's been a long day of travel. I had delayed at the airport earlier today. Brian Burns traded from the Carolina Panthers to, which making the Montez Sweat trade look good, to the New York Giants. Of course, the Giants have been really busy in free agency, or the Vikings signing Jonathan Green. I mean, we'll get into some of the remaining free agents in a moment here, but like everyone's panning. It's like, okay, the top edge rushers are coming off the market, and the top interior pass rushers are coming off the market, and the centers are coming off of the market, and some of the receivers. And it's like, the Bears, what is Ryan Poles doing? Why isn't he signing these guys? Why are these players allowed to go sign to these other teams, and the Bears aren't signing them? Like, Ryan Poles is missing this opportunity. And this happened last year too, when on the first day of free agent negotiating, you had TJ Edwards right out the gate, and I think it was later that afternoon, you had Tremaine Edmonds out of the gate. And we liked TJ Edwards and we liked Tremaine Edmonds. The narrative was like, okay, these are decent signings, but where is the wide receiver, or where is the pass rusher, or where is the offensive tackle, and where is this and where is that? Like, the Bears need these things. Why isn't Ryan Poles signing these guys? That time, remember Mike McGlinchey, the free agent offensive tackle, signed with the Denver Broncos, and the Bears missed out on McGlinchey. And the defensive tackle, Javon Hargrave, signed with the San Francisco 49ers, and the Bears missed on Hargrave. And Draymond Jones, defensive lineman, signed with the Broncos. The Bears missed on Jones. Zach Allen, I believe, signed with the Seahawks, and the Bears missed out on all of these top pass rushers. And it was like, what is Ryan Poles doing? This team is going to be terrible. He's not signing anybody. Like, how are they going to build up this defense? But by all means, it took some time to get this defensive line together, and it took a Montez Sweat trade. And by the way, the defensive line is not put together. Like, there are valid criticisms of Ryan Poles, and when it comes to free agency, but at the same time, Poles is not going to just go spend the more money than anybody else on Hargrave or on Draymond Jones or on Zach Allen. And some of those free agents did not pan out as well for those teams as they would have hoped they would. So it's not to say that like free agents are not always the best. The teams that spend the most in free agency don't tend to go be the big winners during the regular season. When you win the offseason, you don't typically win the in-season. And money doesn't always equate to success in that way. Free agents become free agents for a reason. It's a big risk. It's a big gamble. And it's a risky play. And so, yeah, you don't want to sit there and acquire zero talent, but throwing big contracts at the biggest and best players isn't always the key strategy either. So it's about kind of finding that right mix of where you're going to spend. Okay, maybe you give that money to Tremaine Edmonds because it was relatively within the range that the Bears felt comfortable with, but then they didn't go out and sign the big-time edge rusher. They took the next tier of edge rusher with a DeMarcus Walker and, did some other things in that group up front. And, of course, kind of just filled out the roster across the board with tier 2 and 3 lower-level type signings that added up to a Bears roster, but also they admitted along the way, like, hey, we're not going to fill every hole right away. They're going to go in the draft and get a tackle in the first round and get defensive tackles on day 2 and a cornerback and, all that stuff. Like, the draft is an important part of this plan. And all of it is to say, like, let's see all of what Ryan Poles is going to do with this Bears roster right now before we judge him completely on who he's signing and, more importantly, like, who he's not signing up to this point. Like, yes, other good players are gone that you would have wanted the Bears to sign, and all he's signed so far is DeAndre Swift. But there are still quality players available at all of the Bears' positions of need. They still have a lot of draft capital to continue to add players at those positions of need. And like we saw last offseason, like, Yannick Ngakoue doesn't get signed until training camp. Like, the additions to this roster don't stop after the first week of free agency. They don't even stop at the NFL draft. Like, the process is ongoing. So let's make it more than 3 or 4 hours before we start panicking about what Ryan Poles is and isn't doing. Once we see the moves, then we can look back and say, oh man, he really needed to sign a better edge rusher. I mean, look at last offseason. The Bears, he absolutely did not do enough on the defensive line. Fair criticism of Ryan Poles last offseason did not support the defensive line nearly enough. Pass rush was not good enough. That's why you traded for Montez Sweat halfway through the season, because he was unable to really fill that in the offseason. But by the way, the Sweat deal continuing to look better and better as the other edge rushers come off the market, and Brian Burns gets traded for more than Montez Sweat and gets a bigger contract than Montez Sweat, and the Bears are sitting pretty good, feeling good about what they did to get Montez Sweat, and feeling good like, okay, maybe some of your number 1 or number 2 options aren't available anymore. That doesn't mean the Bears can't still find players that they like. So we'll look at kind of where some of these key positions have gone in the first day of free agency and how things might play out for the Bears from here next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp provides online therapy that's here to help you be your absolute best. Online therapy is a really important part of my own personal mental health regimen. I like to compare it to going to the gym. I don't go to the gym because my body's broken, but because I want my body to be strong, be its best. And the same is true for therapy. I don't go to therapy because my brain is broken or because I'm in a crisis, but because I want my mental health to be at its best. And online therapy is a really effective strategy for me, and I think it can be very helpful for you as well. So if you've been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and flexible and suited right to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire, and then they'll match you with a licensed therapist. And you know what? If that first therapist just isn't quite the right one for you, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. The Chicago Bears can still find quality players in free agency at a lot of the positions that you're seeing guys come off the board already. I know it's scary and you don't like it when, man, I really wanted the team to sign Christian Wilkins or really wanted the team to sign, pick any of your players across the board, Bryce Huff or Jonathan Greener. Like, they're off the board. And that's what Ryan Poles decided. I mean, I'm sure he was in on some of the negotiations. You don't always hear like, oh, the Bears were in on blank player because he signs with the other team before there's really much time for that to play out. I can tell you that the Bears are in on some of the other top pass rushers still out there. Certainly, it's a dangerous game recording these podcasts, right? Because by the time you listen to this on Tuesday, perhaps the Bears will have already signed more players. I mean, I'm recording this literally like after midnight Tuesday morning, like Monday night, to make sure we got through all of Monday of free agency without Ryan Poles likes these late night big splash signings, but I figure like, okay, this late, we're kind of good for Monday's signings. So now we're into Tuesday, and it could be first thing in the morning Tuesday. The Bears make a deal here, but like keep an eye on the likes of a Josh Uche. I think the Danielle Hunter interest is very real, but I think Ryan Poles has a price limit on Danielle Hunter, and I think Danielle Hunter is still shopping around saying, okay, do I take what the Bears may be willing to give me, or can I get more from another team? What does my market look like here? Certainly with the Vikings signing Jonathan Greenard, Danielle Hunter will not be back with the Minnesota Vikings, so then it's just a matter of where he ends up. But there's still a lot of guys out there to like. It's more that like mid-tier of outside linebacker types, guys that don't get you super excited, but you feel like there's something there, like a Romeo Okwara, Carl Lawson, Jerry Hughes in this conversation. They're like guys that are just, add to your rotation. They're number 3 type guy, like a Josh Uche can be in that rotation. Derek Barnett's a free agent. Kyle Van Noy. Like, there's a lot of guys like here, plus still some former Buffalo Bills of Eric Washington's that certainly the Bears should still be interested in. Or on the interior of the defensive line, Sheldon Rankins is out there. Quentin Jefferson is a name we've talked about on the podcast already. Shelby Harrison, Ashawn Robinson, etc. Like, it's not sexy names, but it's going to be more affordable names, and you've already got guys you like at those positions, plus the ability to draft those guys. Like, I think that's how Ryan Poles is going to approach this. He's already spent a lot of money on Montez Sweat, so barring a big deal with like a Danielle Hunter, like, it may be more of a modest approach to surround Montez Sweat with a rotation of your young defensive tackles with another veteran, plus a rotation of some defensive ends opposite Sweat, and then all of a sudden you could piece together a pass rush. And then you can look around and maybe spend a little bit more money on a number 2 tight end. Like, again, as I'm recording this, Gerald Everett is still out there. You've got Will Dissly from the Seattle Seahawks. I know Colby Parkinson re-signed. I know Noah Fant re-signed. But you've got some other players out there to kind of fill out your tight end group. And a bunch of receivers. Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Curtis Samuel, DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, KJ Osborne. Like, you can get some good running mates for DJ Moore here. The Bears are still sitting here in a perfectly fine position at most of the spots that they have needs. Center is the one spot where it's like, maybe get ready for the Ryan Bates experience there. They traded for him for a reason. They seem to really like him, but I mean, off the market already, Andre James, Lloyd Cushenberry, Aaron Brewer, Tyler Biadasz, like a lot of the top guys that you would want. Mason Cole from the Steelers, like the big names at center are pretty much gone. You still got some other veterans the Bears could look to bring in for a competition there, and you can certainly still draft someone. Connor Williams from the Dolphins is available, but coming off of the torn ACL makes that one a little bit more of a tricky option there for the Bears. But like, it's too early to panic. Like, again, it hasn't even been 24 hours of free agent negotiating. It's not like all the good players are gone. You just have to kind of adjust your expectations and know, like what we saw from Ryan Poles last year. Like, pace yourself. It's not just going to be go get the big guy and spend. It's let's be judicious about this. Let's be smart about this. Let's make sure that we're not just getting too over our skis here to make sure that the team is not forcing players into certain spots. Especially, I think, at the edge rusher position, where you're seeing this trade market start to emerge, where the Philadelphia Eagles have made Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat potentially available via trade. The Los Angeles Chargers have made Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack available via trade. Brian Burns obviously already traded. And so that adds to the supply in the supply and demand economics here of the free agent edge rusher market, where obviously, like, teams love edge rushers, and you never, everyone always wants more edge rushers, but you keep adding more players to that mix. Like the Bears, I don't think they're going to trade for Khalil Mack back from the Chargers. I don't think they're going to trade for Joey Bosa or any of the Eagles edge rushers. But if other teams trade for those guys, then those teams are not going to spend as much on free agent edge rushers, which then leaves more free agent edge rushers available for the Bears to sign. And the more edge rushers that are out there, then the less each one will cost, because there'll be more supply, and then demand is getting filled by the trade partners in addition to some of the different free agent options out there. So I think Poles is going to kind of play the slow game a little bit with a few of these spots. Never going to rush in, never going to overspend just to spend. Like, I think Sweat came in at a number that he was willing, or DeAndre Swift came in at a number that he was happy with and signed him early. Just like last year, TJ Edwards came in at a number that they were happy with, and Tremaine Edmonds came in at a number that they were happy with. But, they're still trying to find that number with some of the other free agents that they might be going after. And heck, maybe by tomorrow's podcast, we'll have 3 or 4 more signings to talk about here. And eventually, once free agency slows down a little bit, we need to talk about Justin Fields and his trade market and what's happening there, where all of a sudden we're getting some conflicting information of like, and some really specific language where people are reading into what Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter have said and are trying to extrapolate that into a different narrative. Like, they've said that, okay, maybe the Bears aren't shopping Fields aggressively yet and haven't engaged in serious talks in that way, but that doesn't mean they haven't had trade discussions about Fields. Like, people are really it's a Rorschach test. When you hear a report on what's going on with Fields in the trade market, you see what you want to see. If you're a big Fields person who doesn't want the team to trade him, you're finding any evidence to say, this is evidence that they're going to keep him. See, they're actually going to keep him. And then if you're someone who really wants to trade Fields and thinks, that Caleb Williams is everything you need, then any little word that, no, they're still saying that they're going to trade him. Like, you can kind of find what you're looking for in the market. And again, like, back to my original idea, like, patience. Like, can we slow it down and not look for a definitive answer instantly tomorrow? If Fields isn't traded tomorrow, he's staying. Or if he's, like that, no, like, that's not how this works. We're going to have the updated Justin Fields conversation here only once free agency slows down a little bit. Plus, we're going to talk to Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans to get a local perspective on Kevin Byard after having watched him a bunch in Tennessee. And we'll also talk to, I don't know if it'll be Louis Bidiasi from Locked On Eagles, or if we want to talk to Matt Deary from Locked On Lions about DeAndre Swift and what he offers as a running back for the Chicago Bears in this backfield. But we'll get some of our Locked On Podcast Network experts on all of the Chicago Bears free agent signings this offseason. So that's a good reason for you to subscribe to Locked On Bears right now, wherever you're listening to the podcast or on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, the free agency updates are going to come fast and furious, and no matter who the Bears sign or who they let sign somewhere else, you can be sure every single day we'll give you another opportunity to bear down.